In one of our previous videos, I stated clearly enough, I thought, that there are only three architectural styles: Greco-Roman, Byzantine, and Gothic. Everything else is commentary, combinations, the vernacular built environment, proto-architecture, or, as has been the case since World War II, plain old garbage. Many people agreed with this position, others objected, as expected. Some of the comments resorted to the lazy critique that this view was Eurocentric, which is kind of, well, silly. It's not Eurocentric, it's Rome-centric. Like England, Sweden, Russia, Poland, those are in Europe too, but architecture as we know it originated in Rome, Constantinople, and Paris, all within Rome's sphere of influence, all rooted firmly in the Roman Empire. In this video, I'm going to discuss canons, because many folks seem to miss the point that through no fault of their own, they're not even trying to be, politically correct. They're not even virtue signaling. It's just that the question of canons and canonical elements has been absent from the education industry for well over half a century, and this confuses the shit out of everybody. So the first question here would be, what is a canon? Now, don't look it up. In today's political climate, not even dictionaries can be trusted. What can you trust? Well, your general knowledge of history, some linguistics, and above all, common sense. A canon in any field of human activity like arts, sciences, architecture, literature, sports, a canon is the body of work that defines that field. It consists of canonical elements that need not be justified and cannot be improved. A canon is the foundation. It's not something you strive towards, and this is very important. A canon is not a goal, since it's already been achieved. It's an instrument and a standard, something you build on, not towards. Aristotle said that no science can defend its own basic principles.
Not its own first principles, no, y'all.
Which means simply that the foundation of each scientific discipline is the axioms, self-evident ideas that require no proof. I'm simplifying, but there it is. And that's what canons are, in architecture as well as in anything else. Take passenger airplanes. Officially, the Wright brothers executed that first flight of theirs in the year of our Lord, 1903. It's no great secret that their machine was an experimental proof of concept rather than a practical prototype for future aviation. It was dynamically unstable. It had the elevator in the front of the airplane rather than in the back. It lacked flaps. It didn't even have an undercarriage. And the pilot had to lie flat on his stomach. That changed pretty quickly, following which it took another 30 years to put together a canonical passenger airplane for transporting politicians, one-percenters, movie stars, wealthy mafiosi, and other dignitaries over long distances. This came in the 1930s with Boeing and Douglas both producing those models. A tubular fuselage for storing the unsavory characters in a pressurized environment for the duration of the flight. The wings attached to the sides roughly where the center of gravity is. Add to that the stabilizer, the elevator, and the undercarriage in the right places, the angle of attack minutely calculated, and you've got your cannon. That was and still is the cannon, the foundation that hasn't changed because it's perfect for the type of fuel we use in aviation as well as for its purpose, transporting humans gratuitously from one place to another. Exotic designs like delta wings, flying wings, and all the rest of them, different purposes. The military has its quirks, so far as passenger planes are concerned, the Boeing 247 and the Douglas DC-3 are the canon. The silhouette hasn't changed in 90 years because we hit a physics wall. We lit upon the most efficient way to move a pressurized cylinder through the air. It's locked logic. All cannons are locked logic. Take the spoon. Various forms have been tried in all cultures over the centuries. They used spoons in ancient Egypt. Well, the elite did anyway. Everyone else used their oftentimes unwashed fingers. The design started to move in the right direction when folks landed on the idea of the individual plate. As in, this is my plate. The food on it is mine. I am not sharing, leave me alone. Sharing food from your plate, taking food from someone else's plate, that's barbaric. And spoons, where and when they existed, often looked ridiculous from today's point of view. The bowl was wider at the bottom than at the handle, and the handle was short. The canonical shape of the spoon was finally achieved in the 18th century and hasn't changed since. The X-shaped bowl, the curved handle, the center of gravity where it belongs. You can embellish it, you can decorate it, you can use gold or platinum, but the canon does not change because it's perfect. Locked logic. Any attempt to deviate from it would result in something inferior. In the old days, in Egypt, Greece, and Rome, scrolls were used extensively. Then came the first Christians who favored the codex, a stack of pages, usually parchment,
bound together on one side and featuring a leather cover.
It was convenient, practical, easy to replicate, in other words, canonical. The canon was super resilient. It did not change with the introduction of paper. It did not change with the introduction of movable type. It has been around for over 15 centuries. Now, the reciprocating engine. One of the first steam engines was described by Vitruvius himself, the father of architecture. It wasn't a very practical model. The first proper engine became canonical shortly after its invention. You know, the piston, the cylinder, the cranks, the piston rings. Let me ask you this. The reciprocating engine was invented in England. Does that sound Eurocentric to you? Are there any Chinese or Indian alternatives? Or maybe there are alternative types of gravity found in, say, I don't know, Japan. Or is gravity an English invention after all, since it was discovered by Isaac Newton, who was an Englishman, even though he often wrote in Latin and favored Spanish wine? Eurocentric goodness.
The fundamental principle hasn't changed. You use heat to create pressure, whether by boiling water into a head of steam or by igniting a mist of gasoline.
Pressure pushes the piston. You capture the movement and there's your kinetic energy. That geometry is locked. The setup is canonical and we've been using it ever since. When metallurgy improved and certain alloys could withstand extreme temperatures, the piston engine was replaced by the turbine in some machinery. Turbines, whose shape is also canonical now and hasn't changed in over a century, they are best when the rotation speed is high and constant. So they don't work very well in cars or cargo ships. They consume roughly the same amount of fuel whether they're working or idling. So the car, the ship, and the generator in your basement, as well as the emergency generator in nuclear power stations, continue to use piston engines. And yes, in nuclear power stations, we split the atom only to heat up some water, forming a head of steam. The Empire State Building does not have columns or pediments. There is no portico, no dome. And yet, the overall look is perfectly harmonious and perfectly Greco-Roman. The base, the shaft, the crown. That's the type of elegance that you can only get when you respect the canon. When you renounce the canon, you end up with messy garbage that's hostile to humans and the environment.
An architectural equivalent of a teenager throwing a tantrum.
We've been living in a continuous teenage rebellion phase for over like half a century now. But that's a story, a fascinating one too. for another video, probably. It took ancient Greeks centuries to come up with just three canonical column orders: Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. Yes, I'm aware of the so-called Composite and Tuscan orders. Both are nonsense in my opinion. They look garish, they are impractical, and not especially pretty either. To my way of thinking, one of the canonical styles is Greco-Roman, not Greek, not Roman, Greco-Roman. Fact is that even though the Greeks contributed massively to the future canon, they did not have architecture per se. It was still proto-architecture. It wasn't practical. It wasn't very much repeatable. They did not have standardized grammar. Each building was a one-off, but they did standardize the column orders, so kudos to them. So-called experts and aficionados prefer to be vague. Plausible deniability. That's not what I said. You misunderstood. Blah, 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 blah. But the fact is that the story of the symphony orchestra begins with Haydn and ends with Richard Wagner putting on the final touches. He also chased the entire orchestra underneath the stage so that all that bowing and tooting wouldn't distract the viewers from what was going on the stage. And he also came up with the idea of turning off the lights in the auditorium. Yep, before him the lights stayed on. So each time you see a play or a movie today, when the lights are switched off, remember Wagner. But the big question is, why those particular instruments? I mean, there's your string section, the violins, the violas, the cellos, and the double bass. Then the woodwinds, the oboes, and the clarinets, and the flutes. The brass, the horns, the trombones, and the tuba. The percussion section, used only when strictly necessary. And the harp. That's it. Why? Where's the guitar, or the piano, or the saxophone, or the synthesizer? When you say symphony orchestra or just orchestra, you're thinking of the canon I just described. Why? Because perfection is reached. The foundation has been laid down. Adding, subtracting, or fundamentally changing the orchestra would absolutely result in an inferior product. So use it as it is. It's canonical. Now, since we're momentarily on the subject of music, why the 12 tones in an octave? Because it was discovered that fewer tones, like the pentatonic scale, is too simple, and more than 12 would needlessly strain your ear. So 12 tones in a tempered scale, that's perfection. Canonical. Locked logic. Well, that's enough of these pastoral distractions. Let's get back to architecture. All three styles are foundational, but Greco-Roman is the most important. It's the foundation of the foundation. It's based on the Vitruvian principle. It's modeled on the human body, which is perfect and canonical. The base, the shaft, the crown. Incorporated into it are the three column orders, the pediment, the dome, Hadrian style, the portico, the arch, all made possible by utterly sophisticated Roman engineering and the use of Roman concrete. Now, Byzantine ornamentation and the pendentive, the structure that allows you to place a round dome on top of a square structure. And Gothic, the pointed arch and a bunch of principles that allow you to stretch the entire structure towards the sky, towards God. The seemingly weightless walls, the spire, and the flying buttress. Those three together constitute the canon. Something you should use and always keep in mind if you wish to build something harmonious, something that's easy on the eye and also speaks to the surroundings. Don't get me wrong, I'm fascinated as much as the next person, possibly more, by all kinds of the built environment, including vernacular. That said, you never know these days how much of what's being shown to visitors is the real thing and how much is just smoke and mirrors. fake structures, improved and embellished edifices to match the preconceived notions of the average tourist snapping photos. Now, ladies and gentlemen, guys and dolls, friends, Romans, countrymen, if you are not an architecture student, still continue watching. This part is going to be very entertaining, I assure you. So, a couple of people in the comments, architecture students who seem to agree with me in general and who chose the field, that major, in order to increase, not decrease, the amount of beauty and harmony on this planet, they asked me what they should do, what their options would be. And my heart goes out to them. I mean, since today's academia is staunchly opposed to beauty and harmony, and the faculty consists almost entirely of overgrown teenagers who are aggressively hostile to anything they contemptuously refer to as traditional, which is another term I loathe, along with such pearls as classical, as in classical music, and modern, as in the built environment originating long before anyone I know was born. So what should you do? An architecture student today, what should you do? What do you strive for? Is there hope? Of course there's hope. Look, I don't lecture, I tell stories and I share. So here's some of my thoughts on the subject. You probably should learn to distinguish knowledge, which is facts, from ideology, which is interpretation of cherry-picked factoids marked by original sin, or the sign of the beast, whichever. When they try to brainwash you, resist. Lip service is okay, sometimes. Virtue signaling is not. Always keep the canon in mind. Reject, however privately, anything whose purpose is to get rid of the canon. Spend some weeks, or better yet months, in Paris and Rome. Don't travel to the outskirts. Don't go sightseeing. Stay in Paris, stay in Rome. Walk around as much as possible in the historic center. And teach yourself to draw, there and then. Now, freehand, they call it in school, except they don't seem to be teaching it properly anymore, relying instead on various apps. Apps are great, they are, but they're there to assist you. They're not the foundation. So, learn to draw. Don't paint. You're not training to be an artist. Leave that to me. You're training to be an architect. Forget niceties, forget shading, hatching, and cross-hatching. Draw in lines only. Forget different types of pressure, different line thickness, different materials. Use a pencil and paper, maybe an easel, maybe a ballpoint pen. Learn the proper grip, which is the overhand grip, not the tripod grip. The tripod grip is for writing, not drawing. Do not pay too much attention to small details. Pay attention to the overall structure first and foremost. Do not use photographs, ever. If some guru even mentions the term reference photo, don't listen, walk away. Photographs distort and you'll stand to acquire nothing but bad habits. When you copy photos, you're copying. When you're drawing en plein air, you're building, you're constructing, you're learning architecture. Only draw what you see in 3D, en plein air. Both Paris and Rome have buildings of nearly every era. Draw them all. Lines only. That will give you an idea of how everything works. Proportion, harmony, beauty, architecture. And an idea of continuity. This image is stuck in my mind. A while ago in Paris, I saw this girl in her early 20s. I think she was Korean, I might be wrong. A student of some sort. She was sitting on a bench or maybe on the ground, I can't remember which, in front of the Hôtel de Ville, Paris City Hall. And she was drawing it with a ballpoint pen, line by line, meticulously. This may be a good exercise for an artist, but it's a fundamental one for a future architect. Thank you for watching. I'm Ricky Vernier, coming to you from Brooklyn, New York, and I'll see you soon.